The great chamber had been silent for 300 cycles. Dust had settled on the ancient seats carved from asteroid stone. The lights that once burned bright had dimmed to whispers of their former glory. The Galactic Council, the oldest governing body in the known universe, had not gathered in full strength since the War of Dying Stars. There had been no reason to meet. Peace had spread across the galaxy like a warm blanket. And the elder species had grown comfortable in their quiet corners of space. But today, the seats were filled once more. 12 species sat in the great circular chamber. These were not young races still learning to walk among the stars. These were the ancients, beings who had watched suns being born and dying. They had mapped the black holes at the galaxy's heart. They had solved the mysteries of faster-than-light travel when Earth was still a ball of molten rock spinning in the darkness. Ambassador Velkorith of the Silenthies stood at the center of the chamber. His body was made entirely of living crystal, and when light passed through him, it broke into sad rainbows that danced across the walls. The Silenthi were known throughout the galaxy as Watchers. They did not interfere with younger species. They simply observed and recorded. For 2,000 years, they had been watching a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They had been watching Earth. "Thank you all for answering my call," Velkorith said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "I know this assembly has not gathered in many cycles. I would not have disturbed your peace without good reason." High Arbiter Zin floated above his ancient seat. He was the leader of the Dravith, beings made of pure energy who had abandoned physical bodies millions of years ago. He was the oldest member of the council, and his patience was legendary. But even he seemed concerned by this unexpected meeting. "Speak then, Ambassador," Zin said. "What matter is so urgent that it requires the full council?" Velkorith's crystals darkened, a sign of deep worry among his people. "The matter before us today is humanity." A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. Several of the elder species exchanged glances. Humanity was a young species, barely a few 100,000 years old. They had only just begun reaching beyond their own planet. Why would such a primitive race require the attention of the galaxy's most powerful beings? The Triumvirate of Kesser spoke next. They were 3 minds sharing one enormous body, a living machine made of metal and flesh that had evolved together over 4 million years. "We are familiar with the humans," the 3 voices said in perfect harmony. "They are young. They are still learning. What concern are they to us?" "That is exactly why I called this meeting," Velkorith replied. "Because you are familiar with them, but you do not truly know them. None of us did, until recently." He raised one crystalline arm, and the air above the chamber floor came alive with images. The council members watched as scenes from Earth's history played out before them. They saw humans hunting with simple spears. They saw the first cities rising from mud and stone. They saw ships crossing vast oceans and machines beginning to move on their own. "This is standard development for a young species," High Arbiter Zin observed. "We have seen this pattern countless times." Yes, Velkorith agreed. But watch what comes next. The images shifted. The council saw a brilliant flash of light, brighter than anything they had witnessed in millennia of observation. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky above a human city. Then another. Buildings turned to ash. Hundreds of thousands of lives ended in seconds. "They discovered atomic power," Velkorith said quietly. "And the first thing they did with it was build weapons. The first time they used those weapons, they used them on themselves." Silence fell over the chamber. The elder species had discovered atomic power in their own histories, of course, but they had used it to light their cities, to heal their sick, to power their ships between stars. The idea of using such power for destruction against their own kind was difficult to process. "This is troubling," the Triumvirate admitted, "but surely this was an isolated incident. Surely they learned from this mistake." Velkorith's crystals grew darker still. "That is what we expected as well. We assumed they would abandon these weapons after seeing what they could do. We assumed they would be horrified by their own creation and turn away from such darkness." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the chamber. "We were wrong." The images changed again. The council watched as humans built more weapons. Bigger weapons. Weapons that could destroy entire continents. They built enough of them to end all life on their planet many times over. They pointed these weapons at each other across invisible lines drawn on maps. For decades, they lived under the shadow of their own destruction. Knowing that at any moment, their civilization could end, they did not stop, Velkorath continued. They did not learn. They looked at the weapons that had killed hundreds of thousands of their own people, and they decided to make them stronger. Not because they needed to. Not because some outside threat demanded it. They did it simply because they wanted to know if they could. High Arbiter. Zin's energy form flickered, a sign of deep disturbance. This behavior is not normal. No species we have ever observed has acted in this way. No, Velkorath agreed. They have not. But that is not the most concerning thing we discovered about humanity. The council members leaned forward in their seats. If the weapons were not the most concerning thing, what could possibly be worse? We expected them to destroy themselves, Velkorath said. Every model, every prediction, every simulation said the same thing. A species that builds such weapons and points them at itself should not survive. They should have ended their own existence decades ago. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensors and energy signatures of every council member. They did not. They survived. They put away their weapons, though they did not destroy them. They rebuilt their cities. They continued reaching for the stars. And now, they are beginning to leave their planet in greater numbers. Soon, they will encounter us. And you believe they are dangerous? High Arbiter, Zin said. It was not a question. Velkorath's crystals flashed with something that might have been fear. I believe, High Arbiter, that we have never encountered anything like them. And I believe that if we do not decide how to handle humanity now, while we still can, we may not have the chance later. The chamber erupted into discussion. Voices overlapped in a dozen languages. Energy beings pulsed with concern. The Triumvirate's three minds argued with each other in rapid bursts of data. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was truly afraid. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a small blue planet, humanity continued reaching for the stars. Completely unaware that the oldest powers in existence were debating their fate, Ambassador Trell of the Virax had spent 40 cycles preparing for this moment. Her species resembled giant insects, with compound eyes that could see in every direction at once, and mandibles that clicked when she spoke. The Virax were known throughout the galaxy as researchers. They gathered information the way other species gathered food. And Trell had gathered more information about humanity than anyone else in the known universe. She walked to the center of the chamber on 6 legs, carrying data crystals that contained everything she had learned. The other council members watched her with a mixture of curiosity and dread. After Velkorath's presentation, they were not sure. They wanted to know more about these strange beings from the small blue planet. I have studied humans for 40 cycles, Trell began. I have watched their history. I have analyzed their behavior. I have tried to understand how their minds work. And I must tell you now, before I share my findings, that I am more confused than when I started. Hi. Arbiter Zin's energy form pulsed with impatience. Confusion is not useful, Ambassador. What have you learned? Trell's mandibles clicked in what might have been a nervous laugh. I have learned that humans are impossible. They should not exist. They break every rule we have ever established about how intelligent species develop and behave. She activated her data crystals, and new images filled the air above the chamber. The council saw a human woman sitting by a fire, gently stroking a creature that looked like it could tear her apart with its claws and teeth. Humans form bonds with predators, Trell explained. They take animals that could kill them, creatures with sharp teeth and powerful muscles, and they bring them into their homes. They call these predators good boys and good girls. They let them sleep in their beds. They consider them family. The Triumvirate of Kesser processed this information with visible confusion. They form family bonds with creatures that could harm them. This seems unwise. It is completely unwise, Trell agreed. And yet they do it anyway. They form connections with creatures they should fear. They rescue injured animals from the wild and nurse them back to health. They spend their resources caring for creatures that give them nothing in return. They feel genuine love for beings of different species. Several council members made sounds of appreciation. Empathy across species lines was considered a high virtue among the elder races. This suggests compassion, High Arbiter Zin observed. A positive trait. Perhaps we have misjudged them. Trell's compound eyes flickered in a way that suggested disagreement. I am not finished. High Arbiter. Please observe the next set of images. The scene changed. The same species that cuddled predators and rescued injured animals was now shown eating meat. Humans sat around tables filled with the flesh of other creatures. They cooked animals over fires and consumed them with obvious enjoyment. Some of them raised animals specifically to kill and eat them later. Same human who spends hours caring for a sick animal, Strel said, will eat the flesh of a different animal a few hours later. They keep some creatures as beloved family members while farming others for food. When I asked human researchers to explain this difference, they simply shrugged and said, "It is complicated." The council members struggled to process this contradiction. How could the same beings be so loving and so practical at the same time? How could they form bonds with some animals while consuming others? But that is only the beginning, Trell continued. Humans are a species made entirely of contradictions. They build beautiful hospitals to heal the sick, and then they build weapons to make people sick. They create art of stunning beauty, paintings and music and stories that have moved even our researchers to emotion. And then they create entertainment that celebrates violence and destruction. Humans building homes for those who had none. Humans bombing cities into rubble. Humans crossing oceans to bring medicine to strangers. Humans crossing those same oceans to conquer and enslave. They are capable of incredible kindness, Trell said. I have seen humans risk their own lives to save complete strangers. I have seen them give their own organs to people they have never met, simply because those people needed them. I have seen them run into burning buildings to rescue others, knowing they might die in the attempt. She paused, letting the positive images sink in before continuing. And I have seen them commit terrible cruelty. I have seen them hurt each other for profit, for power, for reasons they cannot even explain. I have seen them divide themselves into groups based on small differences in their appearance and treat each other as enemies because of those differences. The chamber was silent. The elder species had seen violence before. They had seen cruelty. But they had never seen such extremes existing within the same species, often within the same individual. How is this possible? The triumvirate asked. How can beings contain such opposites within themselves? I do not know, Trell admitted. But I have discovered something even more disturbing. Something that I believe this council must understand before making any decisions about humanity. She changed the images once more. This time, the council saw scenes of destruction. Cities turned to rubble. Plagues spreading across continents. Ice covering the land. Fire consuming forests. Each scene showed devastation that would have ended most species. Humans have faced extinction many times, Terrell explained. Sometimes from natural disasters. Sometimes from diseases. Sometimes from events they caused themselves. I have identified at least 12 moments in their history when they should have died out completely. And yet they survived. High Arbiter, Zin observed. They did more than survive, Trell said. They thrived. Every catastrophe that should have destroyed them instead made them stronger. Every disaster they faced taught them something new. They have a saying among themselves, "What does not kill me makes me stronger," and they truly believe this. They approach destruction as a challenge to overcome, not as an ending to accept. The images showed cities being rebuilt, diseases being cured, humans adapting and changing and growing stronger with each generation. The most frightening thing about humans, Trell concluded, is not their violence or their contradictions. It is their refusal to die. They will not stop. They will not give up. No matter what the universe throws at them, they find a way to continue. And now, they are reaching for the stars, carrying all their contradictions with them. Looked around the chamber at the ancient beings, who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Question before this council is not whether humans are dangerous. They clearly are. The question is whether we can stop them. Because I have studied them for 40 cycles, and I am not certain that we can. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The elder species looked at each other, and for the first time in their long histories, they wondered if they had finally met something they could not control. The chamber grew quiet as the observers entered. Every species in the galaxy knew of them, though few had ever seen them in person. The Ynnari were the oldest beings in existence, older even than the stars that lit the darkness between worlds. They did not build empires or wage wars. They simply watched. For billions of years they had drifted through the universe, recording everything they saw, interfering with nothing. Elder Observer Quintus moved to the center of the chamber. His body was made of gas and light, constantly shifting and changing like a living cloud. Within his form, tiny points of brightness flickered, each one representing a memory of something he had witnessed. There were millions of them, perhaps billions, accumulated over ages that even the council members could not fully comprehend. "We have watched since the beginning," Quintus said. His voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, filling the chamber like fog. "We were old when this galaxy was young. We have seen species rise from nothing and fall back into dust. We have witnessed triumphs that would make your heart sing and tragedies that would break them." High Arbiter Zin drifted closer to the ancient being. "You called this testimony. What have you come to tell us about humanity?" Quintus was silent for a long moment. The lights within his gaseous form flickered and danced, as if he was searching through countless memories for the right ones. In 4 billion years of observation, he finally said, "We have seen many things that surprised us. We have seen species develop in unexpected ways. We have seen civilizations accomplish things we thought were impossible. But we have never, in all that time, encountered anything like humanity." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something the council had never heard from a Ynnari before. It carried fear. "They terrify us." The admission sent shockwaves through the assembly. Council members turned to each other in confusion and alarm. The Ynnari feared nothing. They had watched galaxies collide without concern. They had observed the deaths of entire civilizations with detached curiosity. For them to express fear was like watching a mountain suddenly decide to run away. "Explain," the triumvirate demanded. "What could possibly frighten beings as ancient as yourselves?" Quintus drifted around the chamber, leaving trails of light in his wake. "Every species we have ever observed follows patterns. They evolve, they develop, they reach certain heights, and then they either destroy themselves or find balance. We can predict their paths. We can calculate their futures. The universe follows rules, and life follows the universe." He stopped in the center of the chamber, his form growing brighter. "Humans follow no patterns. They cannot be predicted. They break every rule we thought was unbreakable. They are chaos given form, unpredictability given flesh and bone." The images he projected were unlike anything the council had seen before. They showed graphs and charts, timelines and calculations. On one side were the development curves of hundreds of species throughout history. They all showed gradual progress, slow advancement over millions of years. On the other side was humanity's curve. It shot upward like a spike, almost vertical compared to the gentle slopes around it. They went from their first powered flight to walking on their moon in 66 of their years, Quintus said. The Silenthy took 40,000 cycles to achieve the same. The Virax took 12,000. The Kesser took nearly 100,000. Ambassador Velkorath's crystals flickered with disbelief. "That is not possible. There must be an error in your data." "There is no error," Quintus replied. "We have verified these findings thousands of times. Humanity advances at a rate that defies everything we know about how civilizations develop. They compress millennia of progress into generations, centuries into decades, decades into years. Perhaps they are simply more intelligent than other species," High Arbiter Zin suggested. "We have analyzed their minds extensively. Individual human intelligence falls within normal ranges for sentient beings. Some are brilliant, some are average, some are below average. As a species, they are not exceptional in this regard." The Triumvirate's 3 minds worked together to process this information. "Then how do you explain their rapid development?" Quintus's form seemed to darken, the lights within him dimming. That is what frightens us. It is not intelligence that drives them. It is something else, something we have never seen before in any species. They refuse to accept limitations. He showed them more images. Humans being told that flight was impossible, then building machines that flew. Humans being told that they could never reach space, then standing on their moon. Humans being told that diseases could not be cured, then curing them anyway. When we tell a species that something cannot be done, they accept it, Quintus explained. They adjust their goals and expectations. They work within the boundaries that nature has set for them. This is normal. This is healthy. This is how civilizations survive. His voice grew heavier. When humans are told something cannot be done, they take it as a challenge. They do not adjust. They do not accept. They throw themselves against impossible walls until those walls crumble. And when they fail, they do not stop. They study their failure, learn from it, and try again. And again, and again, they never stop trying. The council members sat in stunned silence as they absorbed this information. We have watched species conquer star systems, Quintus continued. We have watched empires span galaxies. We have seen civilizations accomplish things that seemed magical to younger races. But all of them, every single one, accepted the fundamental rules of the universe. They understood that some things were truly impossible. He turned to face the council directly, his ancient form blazing with light. Humans do not understand this. Or perhaps they understand it and simply refuse to care. They look at the laws of nature not as rules to be followed, but as puzzles to be solved. They see every limit as temporary, every barrier as something to be overcome. In their hearts, in the very core of their being, they believe that nothing is truly impossible. And that is why you fear them, High Arbiter, Zin said quietly.
Yes,
Quintus admitted. We have seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. We have watched species that we thought would rule forever crumble to dust. We thought we understood everything about how intelligent life develops and behaves. The ancient observers. Form flickered with something that might have been sadness. Humanity has shown us that we were wrong. They are a species that looks into the vast, cold, uncaring universe and responds not with acceptance, not with resignation, but with defiance. They refuse to accept the limits that bind every other species in existence. He began to drift back toward his place among his fellow observers. That is why they terrify us. Not because of what they are now, but because of what they might become. If they continue on this path, if they keep refusing to accept the impossible, where will they stop? What boundaries will they refuse to respect? Quintus's final words hung in the air like a warning. We do not know. And that uncertainty, after 4 billion years of confident observation, frightens us more than anything we have ever witnessed. The chamber fell into complete silence as the weight of the observer's testimony settled over everyone present. The oldest beings in the universe were afraid, and the cause of their fear was a young species from a small blue planet that had barely begun to explore the stars. The council was preparing to vote. After 3 presentations filled with warnings and fears, the mood in the chamber had turned dark. Several species were already drafting proposals for containment. Others were discussing quarantine zones that would keep humanity locked in their small corner of the galaxy forever. The triumvirate had suggested technology embargoes. High Arbiter Zin was considering something even more severe. Then the doors of the chamber opened, and she walked in. Ambassador Kira Chen was the first human to ever stand before the Galactic Council. She was small compared to most of the beings in the room. She had no crystals, no compound eyes, no gaseous form or energy body. She was simply flesh and bone, wrapped in clothing that seemed primitive compared to the advanced materials around her. She stood barely 2 meters tall in a chamber built for creatures. 10 times her size, ancient law required that any species being discussed must be allowed to speak in their own defense. The council had sent a message to Earth, expecting the humans to be overwhelmed by the invitation. They had expected weeks of preparation, maybe months. Instead, the humans had sent Kira Chen within days, as if meeting the most powerful beings in the galaxy was just another appointment on her schedule. She walked to the center of the chamber without hesitation. Her footsteps echoed against the stone floor. Every eye, sensor, and energy signature in the room followed her movement. She looked around at the ancient beings surrounding her, taking in their strange forms and obvious power, and she smiled. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she said. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying no trace of the fear that the council expected. "I have been listening to your deliberations from outside the chamber. I found them very interesting." High Arbiter Zin's form flickered with surprise. "You were listening how?" Kira's smile widened slightly. "We are a curious species, High Arbiter. When someone is discussing our fate behind closed doors, we find ways to listen. You should probably improve your security systems, by the way." "I had access within the first hour." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The security systems of the council chamber were considered unbreakable. They had been designed by species who had mastered technology millions of years ago, and this small human had bypassed them in an hour. "But that is not why I am here," Kira continued. "I am here because I have a question for this council. One simple question." She paused, looking around at the ancient beings who were debating whether to lock her species away forever. "Why are you so afraid of us?" The question hung in the air. It was High Arbiter Zin who finally answered. "We have heard the testimonies. Your species is violent. You are unpredictable. You develop technology at a rate that threatens galactic stability. You refuse to accept limitations that every other species has learned to respect." Kira nodded slowly, as if considering his words carefully. "May I tell you a story, High Arbiter? I think it might help you understand us better." Without waiting for permission, she began. "I've planted years ago. On my planet, my ancestors were enslaved. They were taken from their homes, shipped across oceans in chains, and forced to work for people who considered them property. They were beaten. They were killed. Their families were torn apart. By every logical measure, they should have been destroyed. Their spirits should have been broken." She walked closer to Ambassador Velkorith, her eyes reflecting the rainbows that danced through his crystalline form. But they were not broken. In the darkness of their suffering, they found hope. They dreamed of freedom when freedom seemed impossible. They fought for their rights when fighting seemed useless. And eventually, after generations of struggle, they won. Their descendants became leaders, scientists, artists, and yes, even ambassadors to galactic councils. She turned to address the triumvirate next. 60 years before I was born, my grandmother's people faced something even worse. They were rounded up by a government that hated them simply for existing. 6 million of them were murdered in factories built for death. Children, parents, grandparents, entire families erased from existence because of hate and fear. Her voice remained steady, but something fierce burned behind her eyes. The survivors could have given up. They could have scattered and hidden and tried to forget. Instead, they built a nation. They swore an oath that such horror would never happen again. And they kept fighting for that oath, generation after generation. Kira turned to face the entire council, her small form somehow filling the vast chamber with her presence. "You look at our history and you see violence. You see contradictions. You see chaos. And I understand why that frightens you. We have done terrible things to each other. We have caused suffering that still echoes through our cultures today." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But you know what I see when I look at our history? I see a species that has faced every horror imaginable, most of it caused by ourselves, and refused to give up. I see people who have been beaten down again and again, and still found the strength to stand back up. I see dreamers who looked at impossible situations and dared to imagine something better." The triumvirate spoke. "You speak of resilience, but resilience combined with aggression can be dangerous. Your weapons, your wars, your capacity for destruction." As Kira agreed. "We can be destructive. We can be violent. We have done things that shame us. But let me tell you something about humans that your observers might have missed." She held up her hand, pointing to her own chest. "When humans help others, Even complete strangers, our brains release chemicals that make us feel joy. We are physically, biologically addicted to kindness. We evolved to cooperate, to care for each other, to sacrifice for our communities. That is why we run into burning buildings to save people we have never met. That is why we donate our organs to strangers. That is why we cross oceans and even space to bring aid to those who are suffering. She looked at Elder Observer Quintus, whose gaseous form still flickered with ancient memories. You said we terrify you because we refuse to accept limits. You are right. We do refuse. When someone tells us that something cannot be done, something inside us rebels, we cannot accept it. We have to try. Her voice grew stronger. That is our greatest strength. Every problem we have ever solved, every challenge we have ever overcome, every nightmare we have ever escaped from, we accomplished because we refused to believe it was impossible. She turned back to High Arbiter Zin. You want to know the real reason you should be afraid of humanity? It is not our weapons. It is not our violence. It is not even our rapid development. It is the fact that we have spent our entire existence fighting for things we believe in, and we have never, ever stayed beaten. The chamber was completely silent. Even the ancient observers had stopped their endless shifting. We are not perfect, Kira said. We have done terrible things, and we will probably do terrible things again. But we also do beautiful things, wonderful things, things that surprise even ourselves. We contain multitudes, as one of our poets once said. We are capable of darkness, yes, but we are also capable of light. She stood tall in the center of the chamber, a single human among the powers of the galaxy. You can try to contain us. You can try to limit us. You can try to keep us locked in our corner of space forever. But I want you to know something before you make that decision. Her eyes blazed with quiet fire. It will not work. Nothing has ever kept us contained for long. Not chains, not walls, not oceans, not the void of space itself. We always find a way. We always reach further. And if you make us your enemies, you will discover exactly how persistent we can be. She smiled again, but this time there was no warmth in it, only certainty. I suggest you consider making us your friends instead. The council deliberated for 7 cycles. Arguments flew across the chamber like weapons, each species fighting for their vision of how to handle humanity. The triumvirate wanted strict controls. Ambassador Velkorath suggested observation without interference. Some called for immediate containment, building walls of technology and law around the small blue planet before its inhabitants could spread any further. Others, moved by Ambassador Chin's words, argued for acceptance. They pointed out that every prediction about humanity had been wrong so far. Perhaps the predictions about their danger would be wrong as well. Through it all, Kira Chen sat quietly in the observation gallery, watching the ancient beings debate the fate of her species. She did not interrupt. She did not argue further. She had said what she needed to say. Now, the decision belonged to others. High Arbiter Zin floated above the chamber, its energy form blazing with the weight of the moment. He had led this council for longer than most civilizations had existed. He had made decisions that shaped the destiny of entire species. But he had never faced a choice quite like this one. We have heard all testimony, he announced. We have considered all perspectives. Now we must vote. The voting was conducted in silence, each species casting their decision through the ancient systems that bound the council together. No one spoke. No one moved. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. And even the oldest beings in the galaxy held their breath. When the final count was displayed, a wave of shock passed through the chamber. By a margin of 1 vote, High Arbiter Zin announced, his voice carrying across the vast space, the council has decided to extend provisional membership to humanity. Relief and disbelief rippled through the assembly in equal measure. Ambassador Velkorath's crystals flickered with uncertainty. The triumvirates, 3 minds, argued among themselves about the wisdom of the decision. Even Elder Observer Quintus seemed surprised, his gaseous form swirling with unusual agitation. But High Arbiter Zin was not finished. This council issues a formal warning to the galactic community, he continued. His ancient form seemed to grow more solid, more present, as if the gravity of his words was pulling him into sharper focus. Humanity is not like us. They do not think as we think. They do not accept limits as we accept them. They will challenge everything we believe to be true. He turned to address Ambassador Chen directly. She rose from her seat in the gallery and walked down to the chamber floor, standing once again among the powers of the galaxy. "We grant you membership," Zin said to her, "not because we trust you, not because we believe you are safe. We grant it because we have concluded that attempting to contain you would be far more dangerous than allowing you to grow." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. You have proven throughout your history that obstacles only make you stronger. Restrictions become motivation. Enemies become fuel for your fire. Every attempt to limit you has failed. Every cage built to hold you has been broken. Kira nodded slowly, accepting both the honor and the warning contained in his words. Elder. Observer Quintus drifted forward to add his own thoughts. His ancient form glowed with the light of countless memories, and his voice carried the weight of billions of years. "In all my existence," he said, "I have watched the rise and fall of civilizations beyond counting. I have seen species that ruled for millions of years crumble to nothing. I have witnessed empires that spanned galaxies fade into history. Through it all, I have learned one truth that stands above all others." He paused, his form flickering with something that might have been respect. The universe is vast. It is cold. It is utterly indifferent to the struggles of the life that swims through its darkness. Most species, when they truly understand this, accept their place in the cosmic order. They find peace in their limitations. They make their small marks on the universe, and then fade away. If a being of gas and light could be said to have a gaze, focused on Kira Chen, you are the first species we have ever encountered that looks into that vast, indifferent void and responds with defiance. Where others see the impossible, you see opportunity. Where others accept fate, you rage against it. You do not simply exist in the universe. You fight it, High Arbiter. Zin spoke again, his words carrying the formal weight of an official proclamation. "Let it be recorded in the annals of this council that on this day, humanity was granted provisional membership in the galactic community. Let it also be recorded that this council does not make this decision lightly." He seemed to grow even brighter, his energy form blazing with power. "We do not fear human weapons. We do not fear human violence. We do not even fear human unpredictability, though it concerns us greatly. What we fear is something far more profound." The chamber fell completely silent. "We fear that one day, humanity will look at the very laws of physics, the fundamental rules that govern all existence, the boundaries that even we have learned to accept, and they will simply decide that those rules do not apply to them." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something in his voice that might have been reluctant admiration. "In knowing humans, they will probably be right." Kira Chen bowed respectfully to the council. It was a gesture of honor, not submission. She had stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and spoken for her species. She had not begged. She had not pleaded. She had simply told them the truth about what humans were. "Thank you for your faith in us," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes sparkled with something fierce and proud. "We will try not to break too many laws of physics." Light laughter rippled through the chamber. It was an unusual sound in that ancient place. Where gravity and formality had reigned for countless ages, Kira turned to leave. Walking toward the great doors that led out of the chamber and back to the galaxy beyond, she paused at the threshold and looked back one final time at the assembled council. At the beings who had shaped the destiny of civilizations for millions of years. "But I make no promises," she said, and then she was gone, walking out into a universe that her species was only beginning to explore. Behind her, the council sat in silence, contemplating what they had done. They had opened the door to something they did not fully understand. They had invited chaos into their ordered galaxy. High Arbiter Zin spoke one final time, his words becoming part of the permanent record of the council. "Let future generations remember this day. Let them remember that we were warned. Let them remember that we knew what humans were, and we let them in anyway." He paused, his ancient form flickering with emotions that even he could not fully name. And let them remember that when given the choice between trying to contain the storm and trying to ride it, we chose to ride. May the universe have mercy on us all. The session ended. The council members departed to their distant corners of the galaxy. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a small blue planet continued its journey around an ordinary sun. Its inhabitants looking up at the night sky with dreams of reaching every distant light. They did not know that the galaxy had voted on their fate. They did not know that the oldest powers in existence had decided to give them a chance. They only knew what they had always known, the truth that burned in the heart of every human who had ever lived. The universe was vast. The challenges were endless. The obstacles seemed impossible. And none of that mattered, because they were going to try anyway.